Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Nikki Aiello. I am a recovery and life transition coach here in Denver, which means I help individuals recover from destabilizing life experiences and transitions through coaching, accountability, putting together incredible, sustainable action plans for them. And you can find out more about me at nikkiaiello.com. So I'm conducting these awesome conversations these days with people who I find inspiring in different areas, all wellness related. So medicine, yoga, meditation, which is yoga, all sorts of things, creatives from all different arenas. And today I have Beth Gurupriya Sanchez. And I'm just going to read you a little bio about her, and then we'll go into it. First of all, today's conversation is titled Socially Engaged Yoga, Activating Societal Change. So here's a bit about Beth. Beth is a seasoned local yoga teacher here in Denver. For any of you who are not here in Denver, she's one of those people who walks the line between yoga and Buddhism. Specifically the engaged Buddhism of the Plum Village tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. As a socially aware person of color, she is also fascinated with the intersections of personal and social healing. She is deeply rooted in this bioregion where her family goes back at least 10 generations, even more on the indigenous branch. She feels that our yoga and meditation practices have not yet applied their capacity to create a just and beautiful world, and that the time to do so is now upon us. She has been teaching for 20 years and enjoys being an elder in the yoga community, which she is amazing here in Denver. And I'm so blessed and fortunate to have her here with me today. She's finishing the stages of writing a book about reframing of yoga practices in the era of heightened racial reckoning, global pandemic, and more. It's dense, intense, amazing, inspiring, and incredible. I've gone through some of the manuscript, and it's gonna be a game changer. The working title is The Realignment of Modern Yoga: Perspectives on Anti-Racism, Economy, and Healing. So that is Beth. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Nikki.
So Beth, I think today we're just going to start out with, the title of this conversation, Socially Engaged Yoga, Activating Societal Change. What, can you expand on what that means, how you see this, how we can understand it?
Sure, I would love to. And I'd like to not just explain it, but I'd like to call how it could look in for a moment. And just to take a moment, for friends who are joining, for Nikki, for myself, to just sit for a moment and breathe. You don't have to close your eyes, but I think I will for a brief moment. And really start with the base. And the base being that it's early September in Denver, Colorado, and it's warm here. And I can hear cicadas, and I can feel the presence of the living earth. And if I just sit and breathe for a moment, and I let myself imagine Denver as a vast prairie land with maybe cottonwoods that used to exist along the Platte, Cherry Creek. And how indigenous people used to pass through this land. For we don't know how many thousands of years. Thousands. Maybe more than 10,000. I'm not sure about Arapaho people, but certainly on this continent, tens of thousands of years of occupation and civilization. Not open, empty spaces, and not primitive, undeveloped, backwards people as we, and certainly not extinct people as perhaps we've been conditioned to believe. And we can just breathe and develop some gratitude for their presence. And in our case here in Denver, we specifically mean Arapaho people, to a certain extent Cheyenne people, occasionally Shoshone people, and occasionally Northern Ute people who lived in this area, and perhaps more importantly, lived in this area without destroying it, without polluting it, helping life to flourish here in sophisticated ways that we perhaps don't know. And we can feel the presence of our own blood ancestors who have maybe come from all over the earth. We start with the land ancestors. We acknowledge our blood ancestors, wherever they came from, whatever their journeys might have been, victorious, brutal, all of it, brutalizing, all of it. And we can acknowledge our spiritual ancestors, real people, real communities, and real schools of practice, rishis in the forest in yoga practice. Maybe we bring to it some of our own ancestral understanding of spirituality, the way the universe works. In my case, I acknowledge also beautiful Buddha, the monks and nuns of early Buddhism, my own teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, and of course my own background with there's a little bit of Mexican Catholicism in there, and there's some remembering of indigenous ancestors, in my case Mescalero Apache ancestry, and indigenous ways of knowing, which I really feel need to be remembered and recentered. I want to ask people in the audience, just put your hands on your heart and to sing a little Om with me, and really mostly just to feel the vibration in your own body. And approach all of these ancestors in all of these ways that big exhalation. Voices together. It takes a little time to go through that process. And I'm aware that there are some ways in which indigenous people greet each other, and they go through sort of a long conversation that grounds them and identifies them in their place and says who their relatives are. That's the most common way indigenous people greet each other, is they say, I'm so-and-so, and I am the daughter of, or the son of, and we come from this valley, and we take care of the salmon. And in that way, things are relational, and the relationality is reiterated, it's reinforced every time people encounter them. And there's lots of places where I could go in this conversation, but I think what I'm going to really try and focus on is a general outline, and I know by nature of what I'm about to say, certain things will be left out because we can't say everything, but a general sense of how modern yoga has been practiced in our lives, in spaces here in our city and in our state and in our country, and generally in the West. And the rough contours of that are that we have done a lot of focusing on the individual and a lot of inner work, a lot of focusing on transform your mind, understand your own perceptions, understand your own reactions, learn how to be more aware of them, put gaps between stimulus and response, that sort of thing, right? It's been very focused on the individual, very focused on the internal. I actually think the focus on the internal is quite good for American people because we are so extroverted and so oriented around all the things that we acquire to get our sense of identity, because that's how our economy works, right? So I actually think the internalization can be a very healthy movement for some people. And besides which, all the poor introverts out there, it's exhausting for them to live in an incredibly extroverted culture. So I don't think that that's necessarily so bad. But one thing, many things that have been just sort of overlooked, ignored, denied, etc., are the ways in which what we're trying to heal within ourselves are actually created and replicated by larger systems that we live inside of and that actually affect our lives. And we tend not to talk about those things. And in fact, they're a little bit taboo to speak about in the yoga space, or they have been. And I mean heavy duty things. I mean racism. I mean police brutality. I mean colonization. And more than colonization, but all of the violence that it has taken to build the nation state of the United States, which I'm not even bought into was even a necessary thing, but here we are, right? I mean shadow work, the things that we have a hard time admitting to ourselves about ourselves, the shadowy things that happen in groups and communities. I'm sure we're all aware that cult kind of dynamics do happen sometimes in yoga and meditation spaces. And then there's this huge call out thing and a fall from grace. And it's just, there's so many things that we've not really brought our attention to and not brought our action to. And in this way, I feel like we've been, very sweetly, but in some ways naively trying to heal the world by just healing ourselves personally. And I am not against that. I want to be really clear. I actually think there's really something to that. Why? Because I hope, as you just felt in the opening sort of invocation / kind of guided meditation, everything is. There ultimately is not a clear distinction between our inner world and the outer world. They arise together. They affect one another. They inner are. But in our yoga practices, we have not addressed the things in the structure by and large, perhaps because we have felt overwhelmed. We don't know what to do. We end up getting in arguments because we have different worldviews. We're not good at conversations about difficult, heavy subjects. There's probably lots of reasons for it. And one other really incredible reason is that a lot of us don't really know very much about emancipatory social movements if we have not deliberately studied it. And the disciplines, and particularly in university settings where that tends to happen, where you tend to learn about those things, themselves are under attack by the privatization and neoliberal economics of everything. It's gone so far, you guys, that we have privatized the self. We have privatized ourselves. And all of our problems, it's like, well, that's your territory. You go over there and you take care of that and you heal yourself. And we don't always have neither thinking nor understanding about the ways in which personal illness, personal pathology, whatever it might be, addiction, despair, self-abuse, racism, holding racist views, and more than holding racist views, having racist behaviors. We don't always put it together that we don't just come up with those selves intrinsically from some evil place inside of ourselves. They're actually conveyed or ignored through the workings of the world. And by the way, I'm not saying that we don't have some intrinsic knowledge that we can intuit and download. I hope that you get a lot of that, particularly in meditation practice. So because of that, we have not really been very skillful at sort of mending the world, healing the world, patching the world. And this, of course, it was very represented and right in our face in the incredibly painful breakdown of kindness yoga.
Hey, Beth, before we go into that, would you mind pulling your whole setup towards you a little bit more so that you're closer to the microphone, and then just continuing to talk a little bit louder?
Yeah.
You're good, but
Yeah,
just a little bit louder is great.
I know what it's like to not be able to hear.
Cool.
Okay. And I will speak up.
Awesome.
Hopefully that's a little better.
Okay, and I also want to let people know that there's a little question.
You know, there may be some people on this call or people who watch this later who were directly involved with the breakdowns at Kindness Yoga. And I was. I had been the teacher at Kindness for the past 5 years and a lead teacher in yoga teacher trainings and so forth. But which doesn't mean that I knew all the inner workings of the company. I absolutely did not know all the inner workings of the company. And so I'm not going to speak from that place of some place of authoritarian view of that. But I have my own experience and I have some reflections about it. And because as a person of color, I sort of occupy a space which understands and very much adheres to the white dominant space of yoga, because I am a bicultural and bilingual person, and because there is an imperative for white assimilation in this country. Okay, I mean, and for me, it's less intense than for many people, but it itself can be very painful in the way that it can make us forget about ourselves or what we know or what our original languages were or the ways in which our ancestors did things or what our traditional foods are. We don't even always know our own voice from that perspective. Such are the pressures to, quote unquote, become American, to blend into the so-called melting pot. Which, by the way, is not a melting pot in the sense that not everyone is equally valued. And I think we all know that. This is, there's a sociologist at the University of Texas who actually refers to it as the Anglo-conformity model.
That's what I was going to ask you. There was a good quote in your book about that.
Right? It's the English language. It's the founders of the country were I'm sorry to say, but it's true, they were the disinherited second sons of Europe who were not getting a big inheritance from Europe and wanting to create a new country that was seemingly based on a lot of beautiful, quote unquote, enlightened principles, but that only really included people like them, right? And so, I know you all know something about the foundation of the United States, but those basic patterns have not in any way stopped. They have been replicated. There have been beautiful social movements helping them to fulfill the promises of liberty, justice, and freedom for everyone. And by the way, those social movements have, if not always, at least almost always been started by people who are outside of the privileged demographic, whether it's women for voting rights, whether it's African American rights, whether it's indigenous people putting together AIM, the American Indian movement, and
there she is.
Okay.
Sorry, Beth, if this happens again, we just have to do this again.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So I'm sure we lost some valuable content, but you did start to talk about the kind of situation here, and then more foundational stuff behind it.
Right. So I just want to say that one of the ways in which the issue at Kindness played out, we got a lot of online and in-person replication of the same kinds of perspectives and worldviews that we already hold from our racial perspectives. And
will you say that again?
Yes, that one of the things that happened in the conversations around the breakdown at Kindness, and these were both online and in person, is that conversations and viewpoints got replicated that we already inhabit. And it became very clear that it's difficult for people to go over here and look from somebody else's worldview, which in yoga practice is called darshan, right? From the root word drish, to see, drishti, darshan, to behold or to see it. But it also means a worldview. And we've had a hard time seeing the world and seeing the systems in which we live from other people's worldviews, okay? And in this way, the dominant ones they sort of like win again.
The cultures even within the yoga studios, the dominant cultures.
for sure. And that is only in part because if we enter into a yoga space, or we're even very advanced practitioners, we are not free of our social conditioning ever. It's still there. And we can experience, and I hope that we do experience, the most sublime, beautiful states of samadhi. And we have the very clear experience that we are, yes, more than our race, our body, our age, our gender, all of the beautiful things that yoga tells us. That is all true. The trouble is that it's ultimately true. And in the ultimate realm, that's not where our problems lie.
I think that's a really important point to get across. I think that's one of the biggest things that you're, opening people's minds up to.
Yeah, and I think that people kind of know it, but maybe we just need to say it. Our problems, our struggles, our difficulties, they exist in the relational material world. They exist in the ways that we do need our identity to go to the bank and interact with the teller. And they say, what's your name? And what's your account number? And you got to come up with something, right? That you, who is not your ultimate you, gets reinforced in that moment and is real and tangible and affects your life. Because if you can't access your bank account, or if any old person can, I mean, it's for real. And that's just a little tiny example, right? Okay.
Well, in a yoga studio, an example would be, just the basic, you're here for your own practice, and, this is the teacher that you like. This is the class that works for you. I'm just bringing up an example within the yoga.
Or, and maybe this is a little bit more stark, but maybe you're practicing next to somebody who is African American, and which, number one, not very many people in Denver in yoga spaces I've been to, but happens occasionally. Let's say you're practicing next to someone who's African American, and you are indeed led into the most sublime states of being. And you have a meditation, and the Dharma talk is about oneness and unity and all of that. And in that moment, for that moment, it's mostly true. And the reason I say it's mostly true is because there's a way in which teachers will reinforce stories that don't fit everyone, because they come from their own worldview. They don't actually fit everyone in the yoga space. All right. And let me give you the clearest example that I can think of. I can't tell you how many Dharma talks I have heard in my life that appeal to my non-existent sense of bootstrapping, of lifting myself up by my own boots. Like, you can go anywhere, do anything. The world is your oyster. Nothing is stopping you. Only your own mind. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, number one, I don't want to climb the top of a mountain and put a flag in it. That's just not who I am. It's not anything to do with my sense of background or culture. It's not the way that I formulate success, right? And number two, even if it is there in the moment and it's all beautiful and inspirational and uplifting and aspirational, I'm still going to leave this yoga studio space, and I'm still going to experience some form of you don't belong. You're not good enough. And that's mild, okay? If I'm African American, especially right now in this era, I'm leaving the yoga studio space, and I could perhaps be killed because I have a cell phone in my hand, right? That's the level that our troubles exist, not in the beautiful meditative space, the very high space. And I'm only saying that because I've had a few conversations with yogis, and it's sort of like, you want to talk about difference, which is very, very important. And it all gets conflated with the yogic teachings, which are applied in such a way that we actually just end up disassociating from painful things. We just disconnect to it. It's called the spiritual bypass. I hope it's nothing new to anyone, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure I have done it. I'm sure I have complied with it. I think that we all have. So I decided, well, I'm going to write a book. Actually, I started out writing just a little essay. I was going to write something about this, and I mean, I'll be honest, it was perspective from a person of color about some of the breakdowns and some of the things that are not understood by white dominant culture in the yoga space from the viewpoints of people of color, some of which were very disparaging to people of color. And so I decided, well, I got to respond to that, because I'm not going to just let that hang out there. And then one thing led to another, and it turned into a whole book, which is at this point it's less than 100 pages. It's a booklet, I guess. But for those who are listening, if anyone is still listening, because I'm not sure, because we lost the connection, but I'd like to just review what the chapters are so that, maybe you can get some sense of where I'm going with it. And then maybe I'll describe a few things. Does that sound good, Nikki? I'll describe a few things in some of the chapters. And then please interrupt me if you've got a question.
I will. And I also want to say, those of you who are watching, if you go to the little question marks, if you want to throw in any questions, I'll check those periodically and for sure before the interview ends. So please throw something out to Beth if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. So there's a foreword and introduction that acknowledges kindness. And then the first chapter, I decided to name them padas because that's the Sanskrit word for chapter, right? The Yoga Sutras are in 4 padas. Also because it's the Sanskrit word for feet. And I feel like we have gotten so lofty and aspirational and in a way, like I said before, disassociated from social issues and conflating them with spiritual insight if we ignore them somehow, right? So I wanted pada in there because I'm trying to convey, let's get our feet on the ground. Let's come back to earth and get our feet on the ground.
I like that.
The first pada, which is probably too long, I think I need to retool it. It's called anti-racist. And in that pada, I describe some of the basic outlines of what it is like to become an American if you are from the founding settler colonial people, or if you identify with them, or if you fit within the demographic of those for whom the Constitution was written, okay? And then from the perspective of what it's like to become an American through force, through the slave trade, and also through dispossession and genocide and occupation of land. And I include Mexican Americans in that to some degree. It's not exactly the same as indigenous people, but I have a footnote in there. It's an interesting thing. Mexican Americans in the Southwest are on average 82% indigenous, which is like, wow. When we have in our own communities, we have this whole thing about, no, we're Spanish. We have Spanish names, we have Spanish language, but for the most part, we're actually not very Spanish.
That makes sense.
Anyway, so that's the first chapter is anti-racist. The second chapter is called worker-owned. And OMG, here's a structural problem that is so normative to us that it's invisible. We keep organizing these beautiful aspirational teachings and desires for yoga spaces in private corporations. And when you have private corporations, already you have some tension and some barriers set up inside of the structure, right? It's structural. You've got owners, you've got an owner and management class. And by the way, and certainly for the owners of kindness, they took all the risk. I know there were some other people who helped finance and so forth, but I mean, it's incredibly risky for them. And it was incredibly painful for them to have to lose that much money. I don't know how else to say it. And of course, the rest of us lost income. But I mean, we didn't necessarily have to sell our home and leave the state and so on and so forth. So in worker-owned, I'm making a very strong suggestion that we study my favorite, which is worker-owned co-ops, which have already been done all over the place and which automatically create more intimate, clear, open, and safe work relationships, because we don't have the fear that if we say something wrong, or if we come from our own worldview, particularly if we're a person of color or an LGBTQ person or somebody who is outside, who is not going to please everyone in the room necessarily, or is going to contort themselves to please everyone in the room, that we might get fired, we might get written up, right? So already the structural relationships in private corporations are a little bit warped. And even in the case of Kindness Collective, Bless Kindness's Heart, it was called Collective, but it was really superficial. It didn't mean anything, because when we got our documents for employment, they were all your standard Colorado at-will employment documents in a private corporation. It's like all the rights were for them and all the adherence was for us, right? And that's how we work and how we do stuff. So we kind of had to do that. So we did. I did, right? So the third chapter is called Alternative Solidarity Economy. And it's a little play on words, of course, alternative. And what I'm suggesting in there is that, one thing Kindness did was had donation-based classes, which was a very tangible and a beautiful way to try and open up the space or take away the price barrier for yoga practice. Great move. Not a sustainable business practice, number one. And it conflated poor with people of color, which is not always the case. And therefore, it didn't really change the culture per se, so that the more diverse population it said it was trying to attract would feel comfortable coming in the space, because it was still very much dominated by white teachers, white managers, and white students. And, for people who say, well, so what? Big deal that, people of color obviously were still welcome there. Sure, that's true. That's true. But that doesn't mean it necessarily felt comfortable or welcoming to people of color. What feels welcoming and comfortable for people of color is to feel like they will be seen for who they are, I should say we, and that their unique perspectives and cultures will be honored, that they will also not be judged per se or looked upon with a sort of dominant racial gaze, nor have to hear the same stories like, the ascent of the ever-winning bootstrapping, leader takes all kind of dharma talk, which is really just kind of like capitalism in drag laid on top of something that sounds yogic. And, people of color, they're like dealing with that all the time, every day. It doesn't.
Well, Beth, I have a question.
Sacred space to them when it's replicated like that. Yes, love.
So you're saying that that's not, conflating it in a way that people of color are then aligned with low income, and then they come in and they feel like, they feel separate, they feel different from those who can pay full price or who are willing to, or something like that ish. I may not be understanding that enough, but I'm wondering, so what is the solution? That yoga's expensive. How do you deal with that?
Because good-hearted yoga proprietors have to deal with commercial real estate.
Okay. So,
all right. So, and by the way, Nikki, I wasn't exactly saying that. What I'm saying is that I think Kindness in their good-heartedness said, well, let's take away the price barrier so that we'll attract a more diverse student population. And they didn't understand that they needed to change and shift the culture so that the employees of the company needed to be more diverse, so that more diverse people would feel welcome there.
Okay, that's an important thing to understand.
Low income with POC, like you take away the price barrier and they'll come. Okay. That's not, it's not the case. Okay, it's not the case. So, and what I suggest in this chapter is that we do have different price points, and we don't replicate them like, I don't know, silver, gold, and platinum. We don't replicate class hierarchies. We actually have a pay it forward kind of structure. And this is really, I have to be honest with you guys, it's really kind of half baked, because I have to be in conversations with people about it. I don't know enough about it myself. So I don't have it all fleshed out, but it's more pay it forward, and you have different price points. And those people who occupy positions of more privilege, they have the opportunity actually to pay more as an act of supporting the general space for everyone, as an act of their own solidarity and reparations for the ways in which class stratification has hurt people who are poor. I'm also suggesting that we have somebody on staff who actually does some fundraising, and does some fundraising in collaboration with a nonprofit who they have a fiscal agent relationship with, so that they can receive funds through typical fundraising channels, private donors, corporations, and so forth, to bring money in to sponsor things that are, for instance, retreats, classes, and workshops where people are actually working on anti-racism, or they're doing some kind of socially beneficial retreat, or they're actually, I mean, I can't even imagine what could happen if we really talked about this, but we could get together and we could actually enact truth and reconciliation here in our own country, in our yoga community. And we don't have to wait for the government to give us permission or to give us funding, or we don't even have to know how to do it. We can just practice. We can just do it. We can stand in the viewpoints and the experiences of different people in our country, and we can talk to each other. We can say, I'm sorry.
So the yoga studio could actually be a model for life for the country, ideally, you know, like start small.
I honestly, I will give Patrick Harrington this, man. He actually said things like that and invited us into spaces like that. We could enact things like that ourselves. We could videotape them. We could create stories. We could create media and a vibe, and we can say, like, you know, we have so little control about what happens in Washington, much less state capitals. And yeah, we supposedly live in a democracy, but everybody knows policy and what citizens want tend not to go together. So let's just do it ourselves. Let's just start it ourselves. I guess I'm suggesting that to some degree. And there are some other sort of innovative pay structures in that chapter that have to do with not exactly donation-based, because here's the thing that's difficult about donation-based. People are deeply trained to get a bargain when they have, people like to get a bargain. I don't know how else to say it. We're shoppers, we're consumers, right? Our economy has trained us to do that. So one of the things that happened at Kindness is, and we all know this, a lot of people who could afford to pay full price just like didn't. And you know, you can, it's so fascinating how you can really get interbeing. My life affects your life. This body is affected by that body, and we and even deeper in the yoga teachings, really it's just one contiguous thing appearing in a million different forms, right? We can have that insight intellectually, literally, spiritually, but then we go out, and if someone's going to offer a bargain to us, we'll still take it, you know? So yeah, I don't know that donation based is always the best way to go.
Okay.
So
well,
yes, Leah.
I was just going to say, I'm sure that there's a lot of, I'm guessing, suggestions and more investigation of that in your chapter about that. I just want to keep you on track because I know you have quite a few chapters, and I want you to be able to list them. And we have about 5 minutes for you to list them. We have one question in the hopper.
How about that? I'll just
what's
list
that?
them, and I'll just list them now, and I won't go into them
Okay.
quite yet.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay. So anti-racist, worker-owned, alternative solidarity economy, reparations supporting, autonomous. This is a whole thing. Okay. Healing the whole. Earth heating. This is about our relationship to ecological systems. All body and gender embracing. Culture creating rather than appropriating. Or I know that's weird and wordy, but it might be culture creating over appropriating, bringing light to the way in which we tend to appropriate rather than enter into respectful relationship with people from different cultures and different philosophies. Root chakra healing, that's why I'm asking us to come back down to earth, not to be so way up here. And the last pada 11, is called Love, Union, Joy.
I like that you end on that note.
Because I hope there are enough kind of snuggles and hugs along the way, but I got to be honest with you, some of this content is very hard to read. It creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. Fortunately, because of Black Lives Matter primarily, which thank God for Black Lives Matter, I'm going to say I fully, completely support it. And I recognize that it has spilled out into many other emancipatory movements for many other people. And I feel like we have an opportunity to ride that wave right now because, yes, it's true, a lot of things are breaking down right now. Our healthcare system is a mess. Politics is a mess. We don't know when this COVID thing is going to be over and what will life look like after we have resurfaced. The small business sector is dying on the vine. So many things are breaking down. And in the process of the things breaking down, new spaces are opening up. One of those new spaces that's opening up is the space for listening to the voices of marginalized and hurt people under the current order of things. And I feel like we have got to bring those perspectives and those conversations to the way in which we practice yoga. I'm all for movement. Endorphins are my first and last and favorite drug, always, ever. That will always be the case, okay? And I really feel like, I'm saying this as a yoga teacher, I have been engaged in so much monologue in my life where I've been at the front of the room, blah, 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 okay? And we've created a student bodyship that wants that and needs that. But what if we had more workshops and retreats where we're actually talking to each other? And what happens in the process of talking to each other is that we literally give birth to the collective that helps us to have socially the kind of group action and collaboration, coalition building, pardon me, that's what I'm looking for. Coalition building that we need to survive all of these breakdowns. And I will add that many of the structures for this, the philosophical ideas, maybe not structures, pardon me, but the philosophical ideas for this kind of orientation to practice already exist in the sutras, right? We've got the 4 immeasurables right there. They're in Buddhism and they're in yoga. And for those of you who don't really remember them, they're loving kindness, sympathetic joy, which is taking joy in the joy of others, right? Loving kindness, compassion, karuna, equanimity, which I take a little liberty and I sometimes define equanimity as equity because I feel like that's really what's up, fairness, evenness, which is equanimity in a way, right? It's all there. Saucha, cleanliness. How do we clean or cleanse ourselves of the toxicity of racism and the way that it's replicated? And no matter what our race is, that we are able to look at how it works and do our best to do some tapasya and stay, as I refer to in the book, in the good healing pain of anti-racist work for a long time, much like we approach our asana practice. And we know, like, this moment is a little bit miserable. And we know afterwards it's going to be like, so glorious. That's why we do it, right? But we tend not to do these things with our social order and our social relationship. Mm-hmm. Why not? Like, let's do it, man. Let's just do it.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's a great conversation. I mean, so many of these are great conversation starters for workshops and retreats, just like so many of your ideas. I feel like your book is going to be a great, something to do workshops based on where each chapter or, one retreat is about this chapter or this. It's just got so much food for thought.
I want to do that myself because, I can sit in my little office and type stuff up and look up stuff on the internet and I can have a couple conversations, but that's so different than sitting in a sacred circle of 10 people with good hearts and everyone gets to share equally their perspectives and their views and so forth. And let me just say something, Nikki, if I might, and this might bring up a little cognitive dissonance for some of the white people. I don't feel like the white voices need to be as centered as they have been because that's everywhere, right? I feel like it's the more to the side, marginalized and even repressed voices that we need to hear. And I very specifically mean LGBTQIA+, all of the people who are so brilliantly leaning into what does it mean to, from a gender and sexuality perspective, to live life as a verb and not a noun, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys know this. I only learned this recently. Most indigenous languages work like that. They're fluid. They're not rigid, and we have the yogic teachings trying to free us from all of the layers of identity. Well, I mean, the LGBTQ community is doing that in so many brilliant ways. And of course, the people of color who are saying to us, and sometimes sharply because it needs to be said, no, we don't have equal viewpoints, and I have to equally listen to your perspective and you equally listen to my perspective, because I have been forced to listen to your perspective for 400 years. I effing know your perspective, right? And it doesn't work for me, and it hasn't and you keep shoving it down my throat. And, you look at any of the social outcomes and statistics, and people can deny it all they want, but racial discrimination and structural institutional racism is well in this country. It is alive and well in this country. And I've heard some of the even right-wing arguments about why it's not here, and it is just hot air. It is bullshit. It just does not bear out. It's denial. It's denial. Okay? And anyway, I'm not talking to the white nationalist people. They're not going to be in the sacred space. I mean, that's, God, I don't know.
It'd be great if they were.
I'm talking to the good-hearted people in our community of all backgrounds, all genders, all of it. Let's make the beauty that is in our hearts, and we have been expressing beautifully in our own way, but let's take it to the next level.
I would like to ask you now, if you don't mind, sorry to interrupt.
No.
First, I will say that my own personal experience right now, and I've shared this with Demita, who I'm going to be interviewing in a couple of weeks. By the way, everyone, we have like 10 minutes because I had to stop the interview and start again. So we have the full hour from that point. It's like right now, this does take discipline. It takes a commitment. Like, I am going to make space in my life to educate myself and to commune with other people. And I'm just going to make space to do something I haven't been doing, and that is to cultivate something for change and healing. So, and it's not hard. A lot of it's not easy. It doesn't feel good to see where you have your own racist tendencies and biases. There's a lot to contend with personally. There's a lot of defense and offense and just so much that goes along with doing this work. So it's not always appealing to people, like, oh, I'm going to carve out some time in my life to go not feel great, and to swallow some hard truths about myself. And just, of course, just the community work and doing what is necessary to do all of those things that you listed, as far as like making these things actually happen, these retreats, these workshops, these worker-owned spaces, all of these things that can make a real live, equitable foundation. And for me, it's like, I was sitting with this the other day, and right now I'm kind of scrambling. Like, I don't know, there's a few, income sources that I don't know if I'm going to have in a couple months. You know what I mean? So a lot of people are just kind of in survival mode, and they're like, shit, I just, I will give when I'm overflowing, that's when I'll make time. That's when I'll make space. And for me, it's just like, right now, as long as I'm reading a book, as long as I'm plugged in some way, then I at least feel like I'm staying connected. Like, I may not be able to go out this week and volunteer or go to a community meeting, but if I'm staying connected in any way, I'm staying connected. And right now, I think it's so important for people to figure out a way to plug in whatever way they can, and have the intention of doing more when they can. So those are my personal thoughts. And that being said, I asked you last night if you wouldn't mind coming up with, a few action steps that you might recommend for us. And I love what you created. I've got them in front of me too. If you wouldn't mind sharing with listeners and your students and everybody who's here now and will be listening to this recording down the road, what are some of your suggestions for taking action?
Okay. Well, I just want to acknowledge you, Nikki, for being on board enough to be willing to read some books. I actually think reading books, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, learning about life from the perspective of people who are different from you is really, really important. And I think it's especially important for people who occupy the space of whiteness, who identify with the sort of generic citizen of the United States. And all those systems were made for the benefit of white people.
I am going to say one more thing, because I want this to end with you and I, not with me plugging somebody else. And it's not really a plug, but I just want to share that there's a new community developing in Denver, and it's the Nurture community. And this organization, incredible entity, you know, they don't have all the answers and they don't have all of the right people, all of the people like taking charge of everything, but they are definitely, you know, they've explored the idea of a worker-owned yoga studio. They're trying to take, you know, provide the space and reach out to as many people as they can for these workshops and retreats and involvement. And so it's a new, beautiful space, and I feel very grateful to be a part of it. I'm one of the members there. And so I just kind of want to plant that seed to people to be on the lookout, and maybe even just find, you know, visit nurture.com. And that's a great place to get involved right now.
The one over on Federal?
Yeah, it's right next to St. Dominic's Church on Federal and Spear.
Yeah, I've not learned much about them yet.
I'll take you over there.
Okay, cool. All right, here's my first steps. Like, read, and in your reading and encountering the pain of people being scalped and massacred and whipped and raped and tortured and displaced and all that, cry. I mean that. It's heavy. It's hard. Feel your grief, as I'm feeling just now thinking about it.
Me too.
Let yourself be real about that. It's fucking painful. But we're strong, man. We're brave. Go for it. So cry a lot, all right? And there's pain in that investigation, okay? Also, let yourself kind of let your brain go haywire in the whole breakdown, and in the learning of new possibilities, accept and recognize that you don't know what exactly do I do next. We just don't know. We don't have 10 steps down the road figured out. Let yourself really be in the moment, and let your brain get scrambled, and let your heart be involved, and feel what you are pulled to from the heart space. I have a sense, you all know that there's a prophecy, basically. Vishnu has 10 incarnations, and Kalki is the 10th one, and that's the one to be born, and there is a Buddha to be born. And Thich Nhat Hanh and other people are saying the Buddha to be born is not a charismatic individual. It is a collective. It is us. Oh my God. Beautiful. What does it mean to lean into that? This is what we're in the Kali Yuga. Inside of the Kalis is another philosophical point from the Vedic worldview. Inside of the Kali Yuga, there are always projects, people, and spaces to reseed the Satya Yuga. Stand in that space, the era of truth. Stand in that space and do whatever you can, okay? So go on retreats where you rewild yourself. You get back in touch with the atmosphere and with nature. Spend time in nature, especially because cities are so chaotic right now. Okay, get involved in social justice movements somehow or other, even if it's just as a funder, even if you don't go to their meetings or whatever it is. Learn about emancipatory social movements. There are a zillion of them. I am very inspired by the Zapatista movement, started in 1994 in Chiapas, Mexico. Incredible, incredible movement. And there are plenty of movements in the United States. Black Lives Matter is huge, but not the only one, okay? Learn the creation story of the indigenous people on the land that you occupy, okay? Gather with your yoga friends and figure out which practices in the book, if you're going to read this book, you are ready for and want to begin learning. You could become a patron of Satya Yoga Co-op, which is a BIPOC-centered yoga space, courageous yoga, LGBTQ owned, creating safer space. I'm Unique, maybe you know it. That's Tyrone Beverly's. And Urban Sanctuary, which is over in 5 Points in Denver, another Black-owned studio. And I know I'm missing a few, but you can actually sponsor or help out there, particularly if you're not really scrambling or struggling, like I know many of us are. But if you've got a little resources, support in some way. Tell me about your socially engaged practices, please. I would love to hear from you at bethsanchezyoga.net. You can contact me through that, bethsanchezyoga.net. Cry again, and then sing. In other words, celebrate. But, you know, we don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know how long the great American experiment in democracy is going to last. We just don't know. We have today. Let's be bold. Let's be courageous. Let's step forward. Let's mend the world, not just by perseverating on ourselves all the time. Do your own inner work, yes, but also you don't have to be enlightened to go help someone. You don't have to be enlightened to repair the social fabric of this country. You can do it right now. So I think that's all for now. If there's any questions, maybe.
Let me see. There might be. Let's see. Oh, Kat. Kat O'Malley was talking about Satya and how beautiful of a space it is. It wasn't a question. So if anybody has a question they want to fire through right now, please do. Also, Beth just shared her website, and I'd really encourage us to stick, together and to continue this conversation, but definitely reach out to her. And you're teaching live and Zoom right now. Where are you teaching?
I've got a couple classes a week at Courageous Yoga, specifically Wednesday morning at 9 and Thursday at noon. And then I've got 3 classes at Karma Yoga. 2 of them are in the park, Harvard Gulch Park, and that's Thursday morning at 9:15.
Oh, I didn't know it was at the park. Good to know. I was going to go to the studio.
Tuesday night, 5:45, Thursday morning, 9:15. And then I've got one in the studio at Karma. That's on Mexico and South Pearl, and that's at noon on Wednesdays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are those all listed on your website?
They are.
Okay.
Yeah, on the first page, just scroll down and you can see my schedule there. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm not like teaching this like radical, earth healing, decolonial, everything yoga right now.
You're writing your book.
I also have Habit Energy, and they're 1 hour or 1 hour, 15-minute classes. So I'm introducing some of these ideas, but to really make big changes, we need workshops. We need classes together. We need study groups. We need 6-week sessions together where we can go through a text together. We can do movement, pranayama, etc., all of that, and also converse and journal. And, cry if we need to, or, beat drums if we need to, or go and communicate with the tree if we need to, or whatever it is that we need to heal ourselves and to heal the social family.
Right. And you're writing your book right now, I'm
kind of in that.
Yeah. So you're in that. So
that it's published. I'll be so happy if it's published next month.
Wow. That's soon.
Yeah, well, it's in final editing, and then there's proofreaders and designer, layout people, then publishing. And
okay.
So, yeah, I hope so.
Can people sign up for your newsletter at your website?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, certainly.
So do that so you can know when her book is coming out. And just being in your presence, I'll just speak for the fact that there's a handful of teachers here that I just know that I just soak up their energy by being in their presence, and their teaching affects me. And just having a little bit at a time right now is very helpful anyway. Like, as I was saying, yes, I plan to do those workshops with you and the ones that are coming up at Nurture. At least I'm in a book club there. That's something. Yeah. But in the meantime, just little bits at a time, that's what makes change. It's consistent. Yeah. It's consistency in something rather than something big once a month, So I'm excited to start coming back to your classes.
The little micro doses of justice and equity and socially applied practice really can make a difference. I'm going
to plug myself again, or talk about myself again to any of your listeners who I haven't met yet. NikkiAiello.com is my website. I'm a yoga teacher as well. So I've been teaching for about 13 years, and I have a home studio here in Denver, and then I teach at a few other places. And my real heart passion is coaching. So I'm a recovery and life transition coach. So I help people not only overcome or recover from substance abuse, but also any major life transition that is destabilizing. So whether it's a divorce, a pandemic, a job loss, a breakup, just a new phase of life, anything that you need help kind of standing up, shaking the dust off, getting your priorities straight, and figuring out a strategy to move forward with accountability. That's what I do. And I also connect people, like functional medicine doctors, therapists, psychologists, Reiki practitioners, great yoga teachers, whatever they need. That's part of my gift and part of my, I'm so grateful to have all of these amazing people in my world, which is why I have, these conversations also, is because I like to introduce these people to the Denver community and to the world, because so many of us can, teach online right now. And hopefully you'll be able to do that too, Beth, with your workshops and stuff, This day and age, you can reach people way beyond Colorado.
Supporting us and getting some content out there and some new thought and supports and so forth in the Denver yoga community. It's really beautiful and helpful.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we've got anything else. Looks like we've got, I think, 4 minutes. It gives you a little 4-minute mark. So is there anything else that's like really on your mind or that you'd like to share with anybody? I mean, there's so much, you guys have no idea how much stuff I had to try and like boil down and to figure out what I want to talk about with Beth today, because you're just so brilliant in so many ways.
Don't mind. One of the things that I'm doing with my partner, who has a ranch down in San Luis, Colorado, is some informal retreats where we're getting together and we're doing a little bit of working meditation. We're also doing yoga practice, meditation, pranayama, and ceremony. But we're also doing some farming, working meditation, and specifically, remember, we're making chicos, which is a very deep Colorado food, a way of making oven-dried corn in adobe ovens and roasting them. And this corn traces its ancestry all the way back to Mesa Verde. This is slow, deep heirloom food in Colorado. I'm not kidding you when I say this. When I eat chicos, and especially with bolita beans, which is the heirloom bean from that region, and chile caribe, which is from New Mexico, this is such a deep heritage food for me that I feel healed. I feel like the land and my body are one, and the ancestors have come forward to nourish me. But we have to be in the practice of doing it. So we're raising these foods and bringing this kind of way of healing our relationship to the land to informal retreat spaces. We don't have places for people right now to do anything but camp. So we've got to build some stuff, and that's going to be a huge endeavor. But that, we hope, can be a place where people can come and retreat and rest and reconnect deeply with the earth and with the indigenous ways that are still somewhat there in San Luis.
And if they want to camp right now, like, they can reach out and see if you're going to have something before the weather gets super cold.
Yeah, we've got something in September 17th through the 19th. I don't know if it's full or not, but we're going to make chicos, which is a deep Colorado heirloom food, and practice. And you just camp right there on the Culebra River. It's gorgeous. There are not a bunch of wildfires in that part of the state. It's a drive. It's about 3.5-4 hour drive.
Well, that's not too bad.
That's one of I'm very involved in projects like that and encourage projects like that all over the place. And people in the yoga space will invent them themselves. They don't need me to tell them. But I hope to inspire something new inside of our hearts and our minds and our bodies.
Well, thank you, Beth. This has been wonderful. And I hope you all enjoyed it. And I hope you share this with other people. This will be a recording that you can, pass on to the people in the yoga community, anybody, the indigenous, the BIPOC community, like whomever you think might be open and a sponge for this conversation. Please pass this along, because Beth is an influential, magical person. So I'd like more and more people to know about her.
Thank you.
Oops, somebody posted something. What does it say? Thank you, it says. Thank you, Beth, says Kat O'Malley.
Okay. Thank you, Kat. So many blessings to everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.